What is your most traumatic experience with a teacher? My 4th grade teacher had a reputation for making one boy in her class an unpopular scapegoat each year. Lucky me. In previous years I'd been just another kid in the playground, but within 2 months the other kids wouldn't play with me during recess. One day I refused to go outside for recess. She asked why, and I foolishly told her that the other kids didn't like me. When they came back in, she marched me to the front of the class and asked for a show of hands who didn't like me. 4th grade kids, mostly, did what 4th grade kids do. I broke down that night and told my mom what had happened and what had been going on all along. She marched into school the next day, got a meeting that included the principal, and tore the teacher a new asshole. I was still stuck in that class, but the teacher moved on to a new victim. Funny thing how self-esteem influences academic performance. My school used to give us a Stanford Binet IQ test every year. My score dropped 10 points from 3rd to 4th grade, then rose 20 points in 5th grade when I had a nurturing teacher. If you are still alive, duck you, Mrs. Erickson. When I was in high school I got a lot of nosebleeds. Like a lot. So I got one in the middle of class and I asked the teacher for a tissue. She said she didn't have any, so I asked to go to the toilet to get one, then she said no. Soon I asked again when blood was dripping from my hands and she yelled at me for repeating myself, which is apparently bad. Soon a puddle of blood was on the table, then I got sent to isolation for disrupting the class. I was then suspended for acting inappropriate during class. She was then fired for putting my life at risk. I gotta say, when you get a nosebleed like that, you really see how much blood is inside of you. Edit. Thank you anonymous redditor for a reward. Edit. For those saying I'm dramatic for saying putting my life at risk, it was the school that said it, not me. I didn't consider it risking my life. I was bullied really bad. Kids kept drawing awful ugly photos and leaving them on my desk with profanity towards my appearance. I had enough one day after dealing with a lot of abuse at home and the bullying at school, and when I saw another broke down crying and brought it to my teacher. She just grabbed it, looked and asked if I wanted it back. Did nothing to help, wouldn't listen to me about the constant bullying, and did absolutely nothing. I was in 7th grade and still remember it to this day. Edit. Thanks for Silver Friend. Also thank to all who wished me well. Unfortunately no, I won't be doing anything towards the teacher. It was 12 years ago. I wish she learned better, but it was a small town school and as sad as it is, that's just the way it was. I hope I can be a better teacher when I'm finished school. Mine is more of a light-hearted traumatic. In 4th grade I collected Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I had gotten the, at the time, new 3 Egyptian god cards. Well, I was caught playing with them during class and my teacher took them from me and threw them out. I was devastated after all the packs opened and cards traded to acquire them. I never forgave her. Did they ever end up being worth anything before all the reprint boxes? I would love to see her face if she found out they were worth some coin. Edit. The teacher was an older southern lady in her 60s, so she was definitely in that mindset that she had 100% say in whatever she did with our personal belongings. Pretty sure if corporal punishment was still allowed I would've gotten the paddle on several occasions. I wasn't the only one who lost cards that day. Buddy who sat next to me had his Black Magician of Black Chaos and Blue Eyes Ultimate taken from him. Teacher told me I was a liar to the whole class as she didn't believe my grandmother was a World War II evacuee. She refused to believe me as she assumed my mum was younger than she looked at the time, and therefore my grandmother was younger as well. She thought my mum was in her late 20s when in reality she was in her early 40s at the time. Didn't traumatize me personally, but I had a first-year lecturer in classics who went out of his way to terrorize the class. His first words to us were, "I suspect as many as half of you cannot read." He then administered a test, which 2/3 of the class failed. He was not shy about voicing his rather gleeful displeasure. I did well enough to avoid his wrath and, annoyingly, get singled out for praise. He would routinely throw questions at students who weren't paying rigorous attention in a 3-hour lecture on Friday morning, and then berate them for not knowing the answers. His comments on papers were beyond trenchant. Are you illiterate? Do you imagine this makes sense? This is childish, etc. The unfortunate part is that he was a superb classicist. A close second was a novelist turned writing prof who hurled a girl's manuscript out of his office door, nearly hitting me in the hall as he shouted this. "It's not writing." She came out to pick up her magnus opus moments later, weeping. Great writer, self-confessed sheet teacher. My favorite teacher in middle school was arrested for child pornography. He wasn't my favorite after that. He also wasn't my teacher after that. During required reading time, teacher brought me to front of the class because I was reading a book for girls, and he asked me back quote, "Why are you reading a G.I. Rawls book? Are you a girl?" Then made me choose a book for back quote boys to read. I was maybe 10 or 11. The book was Matilda, by the way. Got accused of plagiarism over a paper I wrote and didn't plagiarize that I was really excited about because of how well I thought I did on it. Enthusiasm fully destroyed. I had a similar experience where my lit professor brought me in to tell me my paper was flagged by the software for being plagiarized from over 180 other student papers from around the country. Not websites, not public articles, student papers from other schools. Longest chain of plagiarized words was 6. I laughed because I thought she was pointing out how ridiculously sensitive the software was. She was offended that I laughed at her. I asked her if she really believed that I tracked down almost 200 students to steal 3-word phrases from them and stitch them together into a paper, which would take 50x the effort that it actually took to write it. Not in those exact words. I really thought I wrote a great paper. Got an A, but I think it was because she felt dumb. Edit, spelling and clarity. Technically it was the vice principal, but the day my brother died, apparently he thought it would be a good idea to walk in on story time. The teacher was reading to the class, set me on his lap, and tell me in front of everyone that my brother committed suicide. We were discussing Jane Vanier and Lark. For context, Jane Vanier decided to invite 2 intellectually disabled men to live with him and started setting up homes for them so they wouldn't be in asylums. The teacher looked right at me, I'm disabled, and said, "Oh yeah, Vanier created those homes so you people wouldn't be bothering people because the handicapped don't function in society." My friend I left just to talk it out. He got fired a few years later because he did not have his license up to date. Cherry on top, his wife was the vice principal. In 5th grade I would often become sick to my stomach and cry for hours. Later in life, found out that these were panic attacks. My teacher spanked me with a bungee cord until I stopped crying. I still resent her and my parents for that. One time I was on my period and I asked the teacher to go to the bathroom multiple times. She refused to let me go. Eventually I stained my uniform in the chair. I was so embarrassed that I started crying. When my mother found out, she made the school fire that Methodika. Used to love math and science until I had a teacher in 6th grade who would bully, mock, and do everything in his power to embarrass me in front of the entire class. I lost all love I had for school after that class. Duck you, Mr. Bright. Not exactly me, but had a teacher yell at one of my friends for not doing his homework and give him a Saturday school, even though his parents had died the night before. So back in 1st grade I was at this private school, and despite not enjoying reading I actually loved school and had a ton of friends, and it was great. Got along with everyone. One day my sister stayed homesick and my parents dropped me off, and as I was walking in I said hi to the nun that taught the other 1st grade class. She said hi, and I kept walking. As I was approaching the end of the hall she dropped her keys. I heard, so I turned around and looked. In between her and I were 2 4th grade boys I recognized from my sister's class. They started to approach her to pick up her keys when she lost it and started screaming at me that I was rude and awful and some other terrible not so non-like things. The boys were confused. I was confused. They were closer and going to help, but she was furious that I didn't help her. I got pulled out of class to talk to the principal that day. Between her and the nun I really thought I did something horrible. I was punished and made to feel like I murdered this nun. When my dad picked me up that day I just started to sob, and I didn't stop until we got home and my mom and dad and sister held me. I was having a full-blown panic attack, my moral values were being questioned, and I was horrified at myself. My parents were furious, and they called my teacher demanding to know what happened. All she said was she was unsure, and that I seemed to have a run-in with a nun. My parents went in the next morning for answers, and we got an apology from the principal, but not for the nun. And I remember standing at the counter with my big sister, terrified and sad, and this nun walks in and says being rude to me again. My sister is standing there horrified, the front office secretary is shocked, and my mom ripped this nun a new one. The nun hadn't seen my parents there. My parents went to the head father at this parish and read him the riot act. When he tried to defend the nun, they went to our bishop. He clobbered the whole school. But by then the damage was done. I was a target to the nun. Everything I did she had a problem with. I stopped being myself at school. I became very insecure and quiet. My sister and those boys took it upon themselves to check on me as often as possible. They became targets too. So at the end of the school year my parents pulled us, and we went to a new school. I never got my confidence back. And in 6th grade a new boy joined our class. Immediately I recognized him as being one of my best friends from 1st grade. He was in the nun's class. He immediately recognized me, and his first words was, "Damn, Sister Thomas was a real beach." Huh. Which for private school kids was a big deal to say. We ended up staying at the same school throughout high school, and at graduation, when our elementary school group got together for a picture, he said, "You never really found yourself again after that. You should try to find it. You engage always been amazing, you just gotta find it again, so duck you Sister Thomas you cunt." When I was in 2nd grade, my mom died. When I was in 3rd grade, the evil witch of a teacher held me back from recess one day for something. While it was just us in the room, she asked if I went to church. I said no. She then told me that I was going to hell and would never see my mom again. I hated that beach. Not so traumatic, but was a very bad experience for many. My science teacher subtracted 3 points of everyone's grades because he had a bad day. Half of my friends didn't make it to the next year. I was in the 4th grade. Found a dry erase marker on the playground. I wrote my initials on the tire swing. Classmate rats me out. I get yelled at for like 20 minutes straight about vandalism of school property. She starts going off about how it's the first step to becoming a criminal. Being a little kid, this scared the shit out of me. It was probably another 2 years before I believed that I wasn't going to become a criminal as an adult. I accidentally played footsie with a teacher. He was my English teacher and also the baseball coach. The baseball and softball teams traveled together sometimes, and somehow we wound up sitting at the same table. Though I was nudging someone else, and he said something. I turned beet red. Teacher forced me to handwrite a story, then got mad when I couldn't read it to the class. I have learning disabilities and normally used a school laptop, but she wouldn't let me use it. I was talking about the flying squirrels at my grandparents' cabin to a friend, and the teacher overheard me. He bellowed out, "There's no such thing as flying squirrels, don't lie, just to get people to pay attention to you." /view 200D. 6th grade. I was 11. Hadn't been diagnosed with now ADHD, yet. The only way I could pay attention in class was if I doodled in the margins of my notes and bounced my legs. My history teacher noticed I did this, and if he caught me, he'd rip the page out of my notebook, show it to the class, and marvel at what a bad student and unintelligent person I was to everyone. Edit. If you're less suspicious about yourselves, hit up a psychiatrist for an ADHD test. These were symptoms for me, though they may not be indicative of ADHD for everyone. Talk to a professional about it. Screamed at me because I came in smiling and humming BC. It was my birthday. Said it was disruptive, and I cried on the spot, and now I have burning hatred for that teacher. But hey, she got hit by a car. Don't worry, not a scratch though, just bumped.